Now, the Hunt Palmer Show.
Yes! I feel like I've been waiting for this my entire life.
You're listening to the Hunt Palmer Show on 104.5 ESPN Baton Rouge.
Jolly good fun. Jolly good.
Locking down the middle of the day.
America's favorite daytime fun show.
Live from the Mercedes-Benz of Baton Rouge studio. This is Hunt Palmer.
Hunt Palmer coming to you from the Mercedes-Benz of Baton Rouge studio downtown in the capital city on this Monday. Hope your work week's off to a good start. Saints are in pads unless Shoe starts up on Thursday. We got a lot to do this week, and it starts off over the next couple of hours. Jacob Beck and Cassie Spazzali are back there on the ones and twos. Is Les Miles a college football Hall of Famer? Should he be? Scott Rabelais rates that he should be. I'll give you my thoughts on that. Talk to Dr. Jeremy Burnham from Oxnard at the end of this hour. My in-depth chart series continues. We'll talk defensive tackles. We also had a couple position groups that we did over the weekend that I'd like to talk about as well. So we'll do a little bit of that in hour number 2. Lots and lots to do. Let's crank it up the way we do every day with our Genesis opening drive.
It's time for Hunt's opening drive, presented by Genesis of Baton Rouge.
As I mentioned, Saints training camp is underway, and they finally put the shoulder pads and helmets on together today. Full padded practice, first time. So now gets them at 11 on 11. You can see a little bit more, especially what the guys up front are doing. And so Kellen Moore met with the media after practice and had a few things to say. We'll talk first about his thoughts on the opening of how things go. We're going to get into a little bit of defensive line talk as well, which, again, I think you could see the quarterbacks running around a little bit. You could see their arm strength. You could see the wide receivers looking healthy. But as far as evaluating the guys on the lines of scrimmage, like, you're just not going to be able to do that until they put pads on and start going to work. I saw some really good footage of a one-on-one where Kelvin Banks had a nice win on a pass rush drill. That's really good to see. But the Saints defense, especially up front, has got to be significantly better. Last year, they were just a sieve against the run. They just could not stop the run at all. So you're starting now with today's practice and then moving forward and as we move on, looking at the Saints from a defensive line perspective, and Kellen Moore thought today was a good practice.
First day pads, it's a fun adventure in pads just for these guys. They transition back into it. I thought the intensity, the effort, really, really good. It was a really, really good practice.
Thought it was a really good practice. I'm also playing these because I'm trying to get a sense for what Kellen Moore's like with the media. Like, we had Dennis Allen was going to be pretty much a dial tone. Like, you knew that was coming. There just wasn't going to be a lot of juice there. Derek Carr was going to be super cliche heavy, generally speaking. So we're learning some more guys and their personalities with the media, just as an aside, but want to derive some information from it as well. So let's go to the defensive line. As I was talking about, what caught his eye the first day in pads?
I think it's always fun to see the trenches the first day of pads. I think our defense line just did a phenomenal job, engaging, beating everyone to the punch. Really physical battle between both sides of the football. I thought both sides had some goods and some bads, and that's the beauty of this.
I think as far as evaluating the defensive line, it's an interesting push and shove with the offensive line, right? Because on the defensive front, like, you've got Cam Jordan, who, you know what he is at this point. He's a back-end rotational piece who's had a marvelous career, but isn't a prime-time edge guy. You've got Carl Granderson, who is potentially a primetime edge guy. You got Chase Young, who is potentially a primetime edge guy. You got Brian Brzee, who's an excellent pass rusher, is working on some things as far as the run game goes. And then you've got Devon Godshaw, who's new, and you figure is going to be run stopper for you. Colin Saunders. These guys, you know what that group is. In the offensive line, you're moving a couple pieces around. You've got Penning at guard, which is new, and you've got a new left tackle in Kelvin Banks, plus got Tallahassee Fuaga moving over to right tackle. So there are more moving parts on the offense than there are on the defense. And I still think the offensive line's ceiling is higher, but the defensive line, I think, does have a ceiling. They certainly didn't reach last year. And Carl Granderson is a big part of that. And Kellen Moore talked about Granderson and kind of rebounding from what was a disappointing year statistically last year, starting with the first day in pads today.
Yeah, I think our edge rushers, it's just a really good group. And certainly what those guys are doing, Grando's, leading the way in so many ways. His physicality and his play effort stands out each and every day. And so we keep trying to highlight him as much as we can in the team meetings, because if he plays like that, special things are going to happen when everyone else starts playing that way. Now we're rolling.
As far as Granderson goes, you saw what he could be 2 years ago when he kind of emerged on the scene. It was a monster year for him as a 27-year-old. He gets out there and he's just a force coming off the edge. He's able to rack up significant sack numbers and really just be a problem for edge players. And then last year that just didn't show up. Like, you're talking about a guy who just did not play to his contract, I guess is the best way to put it. And so if you can see some of the things that show up this year that you saw 2 years ago, that's a cornerstone for a guy that, as I always say, like, could be on the next really good Saints team. I don't think this is the one, but he could be one of those guys. And Kellen Moore talked about what this scheme may mean for Granderson.
I think certainly, he's going to be able to play with some air out there and some wider techniques, certainly more often probably than in the past, and that's just the way different schemes present different opportunities. And so him playing out in space is going to be huge, but at the same time, he's still got to collapse the pocket. He's still got to close space in the run game, and that's all about physicality and effort. And so if he keeps doing this, keeps being consistent like this, he'll have a really special season. You
were seeing a build-up from Granderson starting in 2021 where he had 3 sacks. And then in 2022, he had 5.5 sacks. And then in 2023, 8.5 sacks. And then you're looking at this going, this could really be a 10 to 12 sack guy. Like, this could be a guy that could get up to 14, 15 sacks if he continues this ascent. And then last year, you saw that number dip to just 5.5. And the tackles for loss went down to just 9. So that's not the guy that you thought was ascending into his mid to later 20s. That's a guy they need to get going here. And so it's a big deal for him to be a factor on one edge, for Young and or Jordan to be a factor on the other edge, and then for them to be better than they were last year in the interior of the defensive line. And Devon Godshaw has kind of been brought in to do that. Now, Godshaw in his time in the NFL has not been a big sack guy. That's not what they're bringing him in to do. They're bringing him in to anchor the middle of the line next to Brian Brzee more often than not, and to help stop the run, which was just a nightmare for the Saints last year. And Kellen Moore talked about why Godshaw is probably a good fit for them.
Yeah, certainly we went through just the discussion of what the criteria is by position and kind of detail that out. We felt like we do have some good guys here who are still in place that can play that role really, really well. Certainly, Godchau's one of the premier players in this league as far as playing one of those interior run-stopping spots. And so, we felt, we played New England. Every time we played New England, it felt like it was a battle to get anything going inside because of him. And so we were fortunate to get him.
I think Godshaw is a really good signing for the Saints team. It fills an immediate need. And I think you've got a young talent like Brian Brzee that you need to cultivate and you need to move on. And, you brought in 2 free agents in last year's class, but I just feel like they were bargain basement shopping signings. Like, Colin Saunders, nice player. Is he a starter for sure in the league? I don't know if I would go, not on a really good team, but Devon Godshaw is a starter in the NFL and has been in his first entire time. And he's just he's a pro. And that's a guy that I think Brian Brzee can draw a lot from. So it sounds like it was encouraging on the defensive front for the Saints in that first day. I still have a lot of confidence in the offensive line. That's going to be a strength for the Saints this year, I think, and on a team that's looking for strengths. I think the offensive line is that, and they got to put the pads on today and go to work. We'll talk tomorrow to Sharif and kind of see what he's seen out there over the last 2 days. We'll have 2 days in pads that he'll have seen by the time we talk to him tomorrow. But it sounds like the defensive front did a good job today, and that was the first thing that Kellen Moore wanted to talk about. So they've got to handle things a little bit differently in Metairie than they did out in California. You're dealing with humidity levels. You're dealing with 10, 12 degrees warmer. And this is early in camp where the Saints have had some issues with injuries. And this is for Kellen Moore's first time running a camp. It's his first time handling an entire organization as opposed to just his offensive side of the ball and his quarterbacks. And you've got to handle things properly in South Louisiana in July and early August. Like, you just have to. And he talked about kind of building some recovery time into their practices day by day.
Yeah, the number one objective obviously is the recovery component of it. We have the coolers out here, which our guys can hop into. Hydration, towels, all the good stuff. Our training group and sports performance do an awesome job just getting these guys ready to roll there. And then the other part is just there are TV timeouts in games, and it's real. And so there is a component you have to train your body to sit there for 2 or 3, 4 minutes, kind of, bring it back down, and you got to bring yourself back up for the next period. And so it is creating a game-like environment as well.
I thought that was a reasonably insightful thing for Kellen Moore to say. I'm always looking for something that's a little bit different in a press conference. And for a guy that's never, now if you've been a coach for 15 years and you've talked to players and they've told you about the fact that they kind of sit, calm down, and you got to go back out there and ramp it up to 100 again, that's not something I ever think of. Now, I'm not out there playing in the NFL, but for a guy that's never coached a game before to have that in his back pocket, I think that's a reasonable thing. And I've been out at LSU practice for more than a decade. I know how brutally hot it is, and I'm not wearing any pads either. So it's something you've got to deal with. It's different here than it is for the Packers. It just is. So you've got to take care of yourself. And the Saints have got to stay healthy. That's something they've just have not been able to do for the last 3 years. And I'm not telling you it's because it's hot during training camp, but everything you can do to try to keep guys on the field, I think is vitally important. So Saints in pads today, off and running there. We'll be back at it tomorrow, and we'll start talking about it with Sharif Ishak on tomorrow's show for sure. Off and running here on the Hunt Palmer Show on this Monday. When we come back, this is not a segment I would do if we were to Thursday. Not a segment I would do next week, I don't think. More of a summer segment, but I wanted to go back and look at the 2023 College World Series and the products from that World Series, how they're performing in professional baseball. Not just LSU, because Skeens is lighting it up, but there was an unbelievable performance over the weekend from a guy who was in that College World Series, and I've got a bunch of names here, and it interested me. Just going to be a quick look around, but it was a loaded field in 2023 that LSU came out on top of. I'll give you some proof of all that when we come back.
The Hunt Palmer Show. You're listening to The Hunt Palmer Show on 104.5 ESPN, Baton Rouge.
I just wanted to take a look at this, and I can't even swear that I've gotten the entirety of the bracket, but I just went back and looked at the 8 College World Series teams from 2 years ago in 2023 when LSU beat Florida in the final, because I knew that there were some guys from that College World Series that were doing great things in the major leagues. I mean, Skeens leads the big leagues in ERA, in National and American League. He's got the lowest ERA in the big leagues. He's been the all-star starter twice in a row. Paul Skeens is a massive star from that College World Series. Cruz made it up within a year and a half and has been dealing with an injury this year, obviously. But the two guys from Wake that have made the most noise from that 2023 team are Rhett Lauder, who has thrown 30 and 2/3 innings this year in the big leagues. 30 and 2/3 innings, he's given up 4 earned runs. Remember him? Pretty good pitching matchup we got treated to in that Thursday bracket final where Skeens and Lauder just threw up zeros, and now they're doing it in the big leagues. Nick Kurtz, who actually missed the last game against LSU, had one of the great games in the history of baseball over the weekend. 6 for 6, 4 home runs, scored 6 times, drove in 8. He had a single and a double as well. To this point, through 67 games with the Athletics, Kurtz is hitting .309, which no one hits 300 anymore, hitting .309 with 23 home runs for the Athletics. Just a remarkable run in pro baseball for those two guys from Wake. Christian Moore and Chase Dollander from Tennessee, who was in that College World Series. LSU beat them twice. Both those guys have made their big league debuts. Dollander with the Rockies. He's been sent down. Christian Moore with the Angels. He scuffled there. Those two guys made it up. Dollander's got 52 strikeouts in 68 innings. Christian Moore has hit 3 home runs for the Angels. Jack Caglione is up for the Royals already. He's got 5 home runs, even though he's struggling from a batting average perspective. And Wyatt Langford got up as quick as anybody, and he was a starter on opening day for the Rangers and has 31 Major League home runs right now through a season and a half of big league action. Virginia was in that College World Series on the other side of the bracket from LSU. Kyle Teal is up at the Red Sox. He's hitting .276, which is very good. He's got an OPS plus of 114. I don't know how to calculate that, but I know that league average is 100. So if you're above 100, you're better than league average. If you're below league average. His OPS plus is 114. So he's having a good run there. Again, I don't know if that's even everybody. We're talking about just 25 months from that College World Series, and you've got Skeens, Cruz, Kurtz, Lauder, Dolander, Moore, Caglione, Langford, Teal. I mean, that's 9 guys, and I'm not 100% sure that's all of them. But we knew when LSU got to Omaha, and you looked around and you saw the brands that you saw, that you were in for a monster amount of talent. Like Oral Roberts was there, and that's not going to give you anything. But everybody else, and that was on the other side of LSU's bracket, everybody else was loaded with dudes. And you're going to see Florida guys from that team get called up to pitch. And LSU's not done sending guys from that team to the big leagues. It would not surprise anybody if Ty Floyd and Tommy White made the show. And Grant Taylor started against the Cubs yesterday, even though he wasn't eligible when he was hurt and couldn't play in that College World Series. I tweeted out a picture of that yesterday. But that's just, it was something that struck me, and I was writing about it as LSU's going to this College World Series in 2025. In 2023, you were getting the heavyweights. Like Wake was out of this world good. Florida was awesome. LSU was awesome. Tennessee stumbled out of the gate and had to shift their rotation around a little bit, and Dolander scuffled, and they put Andrew Lindsay up at the front. But you look at those dudes, and you saw Blake Burke, and you saw Christian Moore, and like they were churning through guys that were going to be big leaguers. And you knew that, even though they struggled a little bit early in SEC play. They had to go on the road, and they won a regional on the road, and they went to Hattiesburg and won the Super on the road. But it was going to be a star-studded field, and it was, and that's bearing itself out in the big leagues right now, where some of these guys not only are there, but they're dominating. I mean, I would suggest Kurtz is dominating. I know Skeens is dominating. I know Lauder is dominated, and Teal's having a great go of it. And Langford's been awesome, but this past year, I think LSU caught a little bit of a break outside of Arkansas. And that's something that I will consider moving forward. Like, yes, when you saw the arms that Coastal had, like Fluky is a dude, and that's a guy who would absolutely fit in the SEC, especially with the stuff he had on that Saturday against LSU. And Morrison had a great year and has a good arm. I don't know what his big league prospects are. He's got a decent chance to make it based on his 6'8" frame and the fact that he throws 96. We'll see. But that lineup that Coastal threw out there doesn't look like these guys. And UCLA's pitching didn't look like these guys. And that's something that I wrote before the College World Series. I was like, this is a fun College World Series because the West is represented, which I think is important because it's not 4-on-4 SEC, ACC. Like, you've got a little bit of variety here and there. You've got, a Louisville team that's hot at the right time, a Coastal team that's won 1 billion games in a row. Arizona went to Chapel Hill, got destroyed in game 1 of a Super, and then got through games 2 and 3 to get there. And they're a team that's won a championship this century. And like UCLA's got this sophomore class loaded with dudes, and Rock Chalowski may be the Golden Spikes winner next year. And like, there are so many storylines there. But I do think, as I looked around, LSU's still bringing big leaguers to the ballpark. So is Arkansas in a big way. But is everybody else? I don't know. And ultimately, I do think that's interesting, but it makes the path to a championship a little bit more pavable. And I thought that LSU had a talent advantage significantly when they took on UCLA and certainly when they took on Coastal. Now, the guy with the ball is the most important guy, and that's why Fluky kept it really close, but ultimately, Cade Anderson was on the other side too, and he'll be a big leaguer shortly. But I watch a lot of big league baseball, especially this time of year when football's a little bit off and there's not football on TV and basketball's over. And like it's kind of a time where most people are not really locked into sports, but I am because I've got a big league team and I'm paying attention to the big league team. And I'm looking, and every day it seems like I'm like, oh man, there goes Lauder with a nice outing. Oh man, there goes Nick Kurtz with another home run. Skeens dominated yesterday, just absolutely dominated in PNC Park yesterday. And hopefully Cruz gets back pretty quickly, and you notice Wyatt Langford pop up here and there. He's got prodigious power, and I don't think you've heard the last from Chase Dolander or Christian Moore in their time in the big leagues. I mean, they've got work to do because they scuffled in their first outing, first time up. But like, that was a really, really historic College World Series, and we look at things like we've got more to pay attention to. I think every Tennessee fan can pretty much tell you everything about the 2024 College World Series. But we've got to worry about 2025 and 2023 and 2009 and 2000 and 97 and 96 and 93 and 91. Like, there's a lot of them that we have in our heads. And I don't want it to get lost that LSU in that 2023 College World Series, as star-studded as LSU's team was, the bracket they went up there and played was every bit as good as it could be. Like, it was absolutely dripping with talent. And I always tell you, like, I don't care. I would rather play Coastal than Wake Forest. Like, I don't need to beat the man to be the man. I'll play the easiest team you got that I can get a championship through. But that's on the front end. If I'm on the back end and I've already got the championship, I like looking back going, do you see who they beat? Goodness gracious. And that's fine on the back end. I don't want to necessarily have to run through the wall all the time. I'll open the door. But when you do run through the wall, there's a sense of accomplishment there. And we'll always look back on LSU's team very, very fondly in 2023. But I think that when you start to look more deeply at this, you realize what they did when they got there. And I look, Bill Franquez has been involved in every step of this program for 30 years. And he said, after the 2023 team won the title, he said, look, there's a lot of national championship flags around here. That was 7 at the time. And you can always have the discussion here and there and all that. I don't have a hard time saying what team I think was the best. And he says the 2023 team he thought was the best. I've gone in, we did this in like a What If Wednesday a few weeks ago, and people were like, well, what if they got into an Omaha-style bracket? Now there are 8 champions. What if they got into a bracket and had to play it off? And I told you there's a lot of variables there, and I'm not going to purport myself to be something I'm not. I don't know a lot about 91, 96, and 93. Like, I really don't know a ton about 97 either. That's just, I was really young. I was 9 for that. It's just a hard deal. 2000, I was in lockstep every step of the way. And then I was in school in 09, and then I have been here covering the team in 23 and 25. So my perspective on those is pretty good, but I can't do the early ones. But when you start to have the discussion and you go back and look at what they ran through and look at Langford and look at Caglione and look at Kurtz and look at Louder and what's still to come, like Brock Wilkin hadn't made it from that Wake Forest team, and I think a couple of those bullpen guys have a chance to make it to the big leagues as well. Like, that team's not done getting to the big leagues, like LSU's not done getting to the big leagues, but these guys have gotten there so fast and have shown already how ready they are to play in the big leagues. So that tells you just how good 23 LSU was. And it's crazy because we would kind of lump 23 in with 17 and maybe 13 and certainly 98 if Florida wins on that Monday. But you win and it reframes the entire conversation. And now you feel like you can lump them in with the best teams ever just based on the results of one baseball game. But ultimately, it's the entirety of the season, and then now you look at the talent level. That 23 team, something special. And every single week you look up at the highlights, and you see these guys doing it. And it's cool to see, and it puts a great perspective on the 2023 national champs from here in Baton Rouge. So a quick diversion over to baseball. I'm not going to spend a ton of time on that, but I just thought it was interesting and something I wanted to bring up here. Is we're still in the summer. LSU doesn't report to camp for 3 more days, so we'll leave that right there. When we come back, Scott Rabelais wrote a column for The Advocate that he believes Les Miles should be considered for the College Football Hall of Fame now that Mike Leach should be considered for the Hall of Fame, being that he was just a tinge under the threshold to make it percentage-wise. Les has got some stuff off the field that you got to consider with this, but there's a lot of stuff on the field as well. I'll tell you my thoughts on it when we come back.
The Hunt Palmer Show.
Genesis of Baton Rouge. GenesisofBatonRouge.com is the website. Every car that's on the lot is online at GenesisofBatonRouge.com, but I highly recommend you go to the dealership for a number of reasons. The ambiance is phenomenal there. It feels like you're walking into a spa, from the scent that you smell to the sounds that come through to the little rock waterfall to the incredible coffee machine and awesome vibes that are in there and places that you can actually get some work done. They've got some partition places off that give you some privacy, but more than that, actually just buying the car. And the delivery portion of a car, you sit in it and you get shown all the features, make sure everything is properly to your liking, and you have one of their sales associates there to handle all that. But in July or August, it's coming up. If you do that, generally speaking, in a Louisiana parking lot, it's going to be 1,000 degrees and not a very comfortable experience. Well, that's why they've got a climate-controlled area right there in the showroom. They'll wheel your car right into it, so you don't have to deal with the elements. Maybe it's raining. Maybe it's 100 degrees. You don't have to deal with that. They think about the details like that at Genesis. It's a luxury brand. It's a luxury experience to drive a Genesis. So get on by and see them if you're in the market for a new vehicle. They're on Airline at Pico. It's Genesis of Baton Rouge. You can find them online at genesisofbatonrouge.com.
This is the Hunt Palmer Show on 104.5 ESPN, Baton Rouge.
This Monday. Hope your work week's off to a good start. Talk to Dr. Jeremy Burnham coming up here in the next segment. We'll do some LSU football in the last hour, second hour of the show. Talking defensive tackles. Going to talk some quarterback as well. Did Saints to crank up the show today as they were on win pads for the first time in training camps. If you missed that, you can go check it out on demand. Wherever you find your Saints content, just Hunt on Saints. Scott Rabelais wrote a thoughtful column in The Advocate about Les Miles' College Football Hall of Fame candidacy. It was spurred on because Mike Leach is now eligible for the College Football Hall of Fame. They reduced the winning percentage threshold from 60% to 59.5%. And that allowed Mike Leach, who was just under that 60% threshold, eligibility to be voted into the College Football Hall of Fame. And Les went below the 60% threshold due to the vacated wins between 2012 and 2015, as well as his unsuccessful run there at Kansas. And I'm not going to rehash Scott's column. It's excellent, and if you want to read it, you can certainly go to the Advocate's website and check it out. I just wanted, instead of going through Scott's column and using his talking points, I wanted to just say, okay, I understand what the premise of what we're talking about here is. Let me just think about this from my perspective, because I was certainly here for all of Les's time. His first year at LSU was my senior year of high school. So I've been basically in Baton Rouge for all of Les Miles' tenure, and I think it's an interesting case because you look at Les, and over the course of a 9-year span, which is not an insignificant amount of time, 9 years from 2005 to 2013, he averaged 10.5 wins. Averaged 10.5 wins over 9 years. And I wrestle with it because, like, candidly, I'll be dead honest. When I hear great coaches speak, oftentimes it makes me think, and I'm like, oh, that's bright. Like, I when I hear Mike Krzyzewski speak, when I hear Jay Johnson speak, certainly when you hear Nick Saban speak, or you hear Jay Wright speak, or Bill Self, like, I feel like I hear a great public speaker. And I don't have another word for this, less at the podium, other than goofy. It just sounded goofy. It was hard to take serious. I sat in those press conferences, and I heard him do the hammer and nail bit. And I heard you throw your arms around and give a big hug and kiss on the mouth if you're a girl. And I heard the Memorial Day thing where it's presidents. Like, I heard all that. And I heard him say weird things like, is Colby Delahousie healthy to kick? And instead of saying, yeah, his leg feels good, he said, yeah, he gives great comfort to swing. And I heard him talk about a running back not fumbling and saying that he had a hand reminiscent of ball security. And I heard all of that. And it makes you take less seriously when you hear goofy things like that. It just does. And you see him eat grass, and it's weird. It was a weird time when he got in front of a microphone. And that's the persona. That's the Les Miles we know. And so you hear that, it takes away from the actual results. And I think time has come and passed where we have seen enough great LSU football and enough mediocre LSU football that wasn't competing for championships and wasn't winning 10 games a year. And you realize that you don't just luck into winning a ton of games. You don't. You can have the stars align and everything can happen, and you can put together one great football team at LSU because there are a lot of great players in state, And you've got Texas right there, and Florida's very accessible, and you can put a great team together. But if you just go over the wins and losses, I mean, listen to this. 2005, 11-2. 2006, 11-2. 2007, 12-2, national champs. 2008, 8-5. Obviously, the year the quarterback situation got away from him. And then 9-4 in 2009. But then he gets right back on the horse. 2010, 11-2. 2011, 13-1. 2012, 10-3. 2013, 10-3. It's an astonishing run, really. And you do have to give Les credit for putting those staffs together and for recruiting. Like, I work with guys who played for Les Miles. I work with Brandon Taylor every Saturday in the fall. I work with Marlon Favorite every Saturday in the fall. Hester and Flynn are in here every day. Jeremy Hill used to sit over here. And, like, I've heard these guys talk, and, like, yeah, they'll do a quirky Les impression every once in a while. Do it again, like T-Bob. And they'll talk about some of the weird things that would go on at practice. But, like, you can't argue with the recruiting record and the wins and losses in that time. And if I would suggest, if you're just going to look at this from a wins and losses perspective, a results-oriented business, which really sports are, he would be a Hall of Fame coach. Because he won a national championship. He played for another one with a completely new set of players. And he consistently won 10 games. He did it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 times. He did it 7 times over the course of 9 years. He averaged 10.5 wins. He won the league twice. All-Americans. First-round draft choices. A national championship. Now, you can talk about what happened at Kansas, and you can certainly bring to the table the off-the-field concerns that have been raised since he left LSU. It's a big deal. And LSU would have to nominate Les Miles to be a Hall of Fame coach. Oklahoma State certainly wouldn't do that, and Kansas certainly wouldn't do that. LSU would have to do that, and it feels unlikely that any decision maker at LSU is going to be in a hurry to elevate Les Miles based on what came out after he left. There's some misconduct there that's hard to ignore. So I understand that piece to it, and that's what makes it complicated. We have these discussions in terms of the Baseball Hall of Fame all the time. And what happens off the field, what happens in terms of creating an advantage for yourself on the field, these morality clauses that come in are worth discussion. And if you want to stand here and tell me like there's no chance Les Miles should ever get into College Football Hall of Fame, I'll listen to that. I'm not here to tell you he definitely deserves in, because you've got a bunch of vacated wins for breaking the rules, and then you've got things that happened off the field that are cause for concern. So that makes it a cloudy case. But I do think that it's like anything. Once it gets further in the rearview mirror, oftentimes it gets clearer. And like while you were mired in the end of Les Miles, the 8-5 in 2014 and 9-3, and then the rough start in 16 that ultimately gets him fired, and then you see what happened at Kansas. Like I can understand someone in that point being like, this guy just lucked into whatever he got in Baton Rouge. But if you want to sit here and say that he got lucky for 9 years, that's a tall stretch. Tall stretch. I'm telling you, bluntly, the guy in front of the microphone was hard to take seriously. But if you just pull up the record and you see how many times he's ripping off 10, 11, 12 wins, not a lot of guys doing that in college football. Doesn't happen a lot. Not a lot doing it for 9 years. You get a hot quarterback, you have 2 great years, cool. 9 years, averaging 10.5 wins, that's hard to just scoff at. It really is. So I stand pretty close to the fence if I'm not on it with this. I can see both sides of it. That's in my personality, per the personality test we do here at Guarantee. If you made me made me stand on one side. I would say he's not a college football Hall of Famer, but I'd listen to the case. I get it. Some issues that could be impossible to ignore. But so are the wins and losses to me. So it's a great column that Scott wrote at The Advocate. I highly suggest y'all go check it out and read it. Scott's got his thoughts on it. Ultimately, I don't expect anything to come of this because I don't think LSU is going to raise it. But we can talk about it on a talk show in the middle of the summer. And more than anything with the Hall of Fame, I think it's just, I wanted to come on here and make the point that I believe that because the end went poorly and in the middle of it, there was so much of that nonsense at the podium, we probably don't look at the wins and losses like we should have. It was a really good run that Les had at LSU, a really good run. And if Saban doesn't show up across the way, who knows? And that's a factor. People talk about it with Patrick Ewing all the time and Jordan being there. Just bad timing. Bad timing to show up when Saban was at the height of his powers. And at the height of his powers, where the entire Alabama football program was locked in on you because they put their bye in front of you and CBS put it in the primetime game and game day was always there. And it was just, you were in their crosshairs for a long time. And that's a bad place to be. But it was a heck of a run for a long time there for Les Miles at LSU. That's my thoughts on Rab's column over at The Advocate. Go check it out at theadvocate.com. All right, we'll come back, close out the hour next.
The Hunt Palmer Show. You're listening to The Hunt Palmer Show on 104.5 ESPN, Baton Rouge.
Hour number one here on a Monday edition of the Hunt Palmer Show. Of course, the Saints put the pads on today. I saw Jay Castor posting earlier that his oldest is hitting training camp over at U-High today. Football season is rapidly approaching, training camp underway all over the place. And with that, generally speaking, comes some injuries, just the nature of the beast. And it's our pleasure every other Monday to talk with Dr. Jeremy Burnham from Oxnard. He's the medical director of sports medicine, section head of orthopedic surgery. Gives us a little bit of time here on this Monday. Dr. Burnham, how are you?
Hey, I'm doing great, Hunt. Excited about football getting started and looking forward to some cooler weather this fall.
Hopefully so. It seems like it's a long way away now, but it'll get here eventually. Do y'all see an uptick in injuries as football cranks up here, especially when it's hot in the early going?
I think there's always a bit of an uptick in the fall. Football is obviously a big part of that, but you have a lot of other sports going on. One thing I've noticed over the past several years, though, is because of the advent of year-round sports that we don't see it being as seasonal as it used to be. I mean, people are getting injured 12 months a year, but certainly football gets a little bit busier.
We were talking a little earlier, knees, one of your specialties over at Oxnard, and you were talking about a new procedure y'all have using sea creature. Can you fill us in on this?
It sounds like science fiction, but it's not. Yeah, I think we're talking about the cartilage in the knee. And so when you bend your knee, when you walk on your knee, it's being covered by cartilage, and that's what allows you to move your knee without any pain. And there's a lot of these knee injuries end up resulting in damage to the cartilage. For many years, there weren't a lot of good treatment options out there. You may have heard of some things like microfracture. I heard, I think Jacob Hester on the radio one day talking about that. And so those are some things we've done in the past. And now there's a lot of technology. And one of the newest things we're doing is actually using coral that has been harvested from the ocean. And, they did some science and they found out that if you implant that type of coral in the knee where there's a hole in the cartilage, that it actually stimulates the knee to grow cartilage back in that pothole, which is amazing and kind of crazy at the same time, but super exciting because I think it's going to offer some treatment modalities to people that maybe before just didn't really have a good option.
This may be a little bit too deep into the weeds, no pun intended there, but how do they even decide that that's something they want to try? That seems like so far out of the box. Obviously, I'm not in medicine at all, but do they just try just about anything?
Well, they don't try just about anything. It is kind of a fascinating story, and this just came to the market a year ago, but they've been studying it for 15 years. And somebody found out that if you took a cartilage cell from somebody's body, and you put it in a certain size pore or a certain size tunnel, that cell was triggered to start growing cartilage. And so somebody took that knowledge, which got published in a scientific journal somewhere, and they were studying coral, and they noticed that in this specific type of coral, that the size of the holes or the pores in that coral basically were exactly that same size. And so they started doing studies in the lab to say, if we put some cartilage cells in here, does that start growing cartilage? And of course, then they go through that process where it eventually gets to, the point where they say, is it safe? Can we do it in humans? Does it work in humans? So that's been going on like 15 years, and just recently has gone through all the clinical trials and now is commercially available.
That is it's fascinating stuff. Obviously, with injuries in the fall and football, can come physical therapy on the back end of that as well. I know you talk about your walk-in clinic when we have a good chance to chat, and y'all don't need any sort of referral. You can just walk in, right?
Yeah, so one of the really cool things in Louisiana is they passed something years ago called direct access, and so the way what that means is as a patient, you can go see a physical therapist, and you don't have to have a doctor's referral to a physical therapist. And so we've set that up at Ochsner too, because we hear from a lot of patients that are like, hey, I strained my hamstring. I don't really want to come in and go through the whole doctor's visit, or I don't know if I really need to see a doctor yet. I just want somebody to be able to kind of work on it. And you can do just that. You can go to find a doctor on Ochsner's website, and you can actually search out our physical therapist, and you can just schedule your own physical therapy visit. Don't have to have a doctor's referral. They'll take care of you. They're really good and trained at, knowing if there is something that needed to go to the next level of care, they would let you know. But in a lot of cases, you can just come in and manage that injury with them and not have to go through the hassle of trying to find an appointment that works, for your time.
Awesome stuff. Dr. Burnham, we appreciate some time. I'll let you get back to work. We'll talk in a couple of weeks. Thanks.
Hey, great talking to you. Thanks.
Dr. Jeremy Burnham at Sports Health, presented by Ochsner Andrews Orthopedics and Sports Medicine Institute. At Ochsner Andrews Orthopedic and Sports Medicine Institute, we know that sports injuries can be unpredictable. One situation you can protect yourself from is heat illness. Some key signs to look out for include excessive sweating, dry mouth, dizziness, fast heart rate, or a change in mental status. If you feel any of those symptoms, stop physical activity immediately and find a place to cool off and replenish fluids. To learn more about sports injury prevention and treatment, visit ochsner.org/BRortho. Thanks to Dr. Burnham for a little bit of that. That's incredibly fascinating to me. We were talking before we came on the show, and to have coral put into the knee to help relieve pain and increase mobility and all that is just, it once again furthers the theory that there are a lot of people that are a lot smarter than me out there. Like I just am fascinated by what humans can figure out. I can't figure out anything. I don't know how to lock my door properly. And there are people that can figure out how to put coral into somebody's knee and make sure that they're able to function at a much higher level. That's craziness to me, but we appreciate Dr. Burnham for bringing that on. And certainly that's a big, big deal when you talk about heat illness this time of year. Got to be very, very vigilant about that, not only in football, but just in day-to-day life. And then, of course, the physical therapy aspect that he talked about there, where if you feel some discomfort, some pain, don't feel like you've got some sort of significant injury, just want to get it looked out, go to find a doctor at ochsner.org and get into physical therapy directly. You don't even have to go through the referral process of a doctor. So thanks to Dr. Burnham for making that happen here on this Monday. That's it for hour number one here. Fast-moving hour number one on this Monday. Like them that way. Kellen Moore met with the media after the Saints' first practice today in pads and had a lot to say about the defensive line. I mentioned that. You can find it wherever you find your sound at Hunt on Saints. So that's either Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google, and certainly on YouTube as well. All of our Saints content funneled there every single day. Hunt on Saints. Just went a little bit into the research bin at 1:15 talking about the 2023 College World Series field and just how much those guys are excelling at the major league level. It's not just Paul Skeens. It's a bunch of guys from a bunch of different schools that have had great starts to their major league careers just 25 months after the College World Series in Omaha. So went down that memory lane and then talked about Les Miles, the potential College Football Hall of Famer. Is he? I gave my thoughts. I'm probably going to fall short of that, but I understand the argument for sure. And you can go back and listen to some of that, and you can find it at Hunt on LSU as well. Hunt on LSU. All right, hour number two, heavy on LSU football. I've written a lot about LSU football over the weekend. Defensive tackles up at LouisianaSports.net today, so we'll get into a little bit of that after your national headlines at Sports Center. Come back with us for hour number two on this Monday edition of The Hunt Palmer Show.
The Hunt Palmer Show.
One Bath and Closets. OneBathAndClosets.com is the website. David Duvall and his team, 30 years redesigning and remodeling bathrooms and closets. You do something for 3 decades, you probably got it figured out. So that's the point that I'm making to you. If you've got a project in your bathroom, whether it's a simple tub to shower conversion or maybe a full-scale renovation, call the professional who's been at it for 30 years. Call the organization that's licensed, bonded, and insured, not the guy down the street who takes cash. Get David Vaughn and his team a chance to do it. They'll do it right the first time and leave the competition behind. I mentioned that tub to shower conversion. They do those all the time. If you don't use your tub, it's old, it's dingy, it doesn't function right, get rid of it. Put in a gorgeous glass walk-in shower. It changes the aesthetic of your bathroom, changes the functionality of your bathroom, adds some value to your home. You can get that free consultation. It doesn't cost you anything. A free consultation at onebathandclosets.com. That's onebathandclosets.com.